Hello and good morning. I'm Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and I'm really excited to spend the next hour with you chatting about a variety of topics, some game-related, some Stonemaier-related, and some, I don't know, some offshoots of those topics, some various things going on with me, and hopefully some things going on with you as well. I have a few questions of the day planned for today, things that I'm genuinely curious about your responses to. And I guess before I forget, I'll go over the topics that I mentioned in the title here. The first is I have the topic of farm dinners. I went to a dinner with a few friends and Megan at a farm this past weekend, a farm about an hour south of St. Louis, where they hosted this beautiful dinner. Like, it was essentially a very, very fancy dinner in a rustic environment on this farm. Where we wandered around the farm for a while. We got drinks, we hung out with a peacock and a goat and some pigs, and then we sat down with about 100 other people for a really elevated, delicious meal. And I'm curious, I've heard of some farms doing this as an additional source of income and for community building for people who don't normally see where their food comes from. And so I'm curious if you've heard of this, if you've done anything like this. And I had a great experience. I really, really enjoyed it. It's one of those times where I feel, maybe not feel bad, but as someone who primarily eats pescatarian, I really don't eat much meat at all. I don't eat much fish. It's mostly just vegetables and non-meat foods. It's one of those circumstances where feeling bad, it really isn't the right term, but it is maybe a slight limitation as to the full experience of what they're offering at this farm, because they make many things at the farm, and everything that we ate was made at that farm or grown at that farm. But part of it was meat, and we had a substitute. We had mushrooms instead of the pork that they were serving to everyone else. So, curious about your thoughts about that. If you've had a farm dinner, if you have ever felt that your dietary restrictions or limitations get in the way of the full experience of the meal that you're trying to enjoy. Chad says that his mom grew up on a farm, so family dinners back at the farm were so good. I bet they were good. Yeah. William is mentioning one of the other topics I wanted to mention. William is coming to Design Day this weekend. The Stonemaier Games annual Design Day. I think this is like the 10th or 11th is this weekend. And I'm really excited about it. It isn't, I'm mentioning it a little awkwardly because it is not open to people who haven't already signed up. It is sold out. It is full at Pieces Board Game Cafe. But I'm really looking forward to seeing the creativity, the generosity of people who come to playtest games, and just to see friendly faces like William, who are able to come multiple years and get to see them again. And we're playing disc golf the day before with around 30 people, so that'll be a lot of fun as well. I'm really looking forward to that, William. I look forward to seeing you. Jeff says, thanks to Joe for a quick reply to his order concern, and happy new season of Survivor Day. Yes, today is the kickoff of the new season of Survivor, at least the American version of Survivor. I'm really looking forward to it. I probably won't be able to watch the episode until Friday at the earliest, but I'm very, very excited about the new episode of Survivor. And if you haven't ever watched Survivor, feel free to join in. I'm probably going to be talking about it a little bit from week to week. So it's never too late to join in on Survivor. Zach says, with Design Day always selling out, have you ever thought of hosting it twice a year? You know, we have actually talked about this a little bit. I really like having it at Pieces. And actually, one factor of that is that Pieces is going to move to a bigger space that's right near their current space, but a much bigger space in the near future. So it might be possible for us to just have a bigger Design Day. If it works logistically, it could end up feeling too big, but we might try that. We like to experiment, so we might try a year where we just like let everyone come and we let everyone fit into the pieces, and we see if it's too big or too much. We give that a try. We are also considering doing a kind of a Design Day afternoon at Geekway to the West this coming year, if it works out with Geekway. So we might try that to see if it's a good fit. I don't know if I really want to do two full Design Days twice a year. I don't know. We've talked about it. I think my inclination is to try something smaller but Design Day related at Geekway, and also try just a bigger Design Day at the bigger piece of space before we try doing two a year. But we'll see about that. Mark says that he has some experiences eating at his grandparents' farm as well, eating with their hands. We fortunately had utensils, but there is something rustic about eating with your hands, as I did recently at a Low Country Boil. Garrett mentions a similar experience at a pumpkin patch, where you get to go. So it just, I guess, various ways of going to local farms to seeing where your food can come from, or it does come from, I think it's something special. I don't know. I really appreciate being in an area where I live in a city here in St. Louis, but I can drive 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour in this case, outside the city and see where my food comes from, which is pretty incredible. This is one of the farms that actually comes to the farmer's market that I go to. So it really is literally the food that I buy at the farmer's market. Tyler says he's loving Stamp Swap. 5 plays so far of Stamp Swap. That's awesome, Tyler. I'm glad you're having fun with it. That means a lot to me. And I'm really happy to hear that. I hope. So shipping update for Stamp Swap and the Apiary expansion. As far as I know, most copies have been shipped. It seems that Australia is running a little slow. I don't know if Europe is complete either. Australia is having, I think, some staffing issues right now, the fulfillment center in Australia. So they had an amount of copies to ship that they should have been able to ship through in about a week. And we're now at 2 weeks. And that process, I think, still is not complete due to these staffing issues. So if you're in Australia, New Zealand, Asia, and you're waiting for your shipment, thank you for your patience. And we are definitely pushing the fulfillment center to get those copies out as soon as possible. I think US and Canada are complete, and I'm not 100% sure about Europe. Tony says, I believe you watched Game of Thrones. I did watch Game of Thrones, but still enjoying House of the Dragon. I saw that Christopher Hivju, who played the big redheaded Tormund, is now in love with disc golf. Yes, he is. Yeah, he has appeared on a few videos that I've seen for when the disc golf tour goes to Europe for some big events. And he's apparently quite good. I think he's a big, strong guy, so he's got a pretty good throw. You still have to be good at putting, but I think he's actually a pretty good putter too. And yeah, he is. There are some videos out there on YouTube of him playing disc golf that are amusing to watch. He seems like he'd be a fun guy to play with. Julio says, any new games that I'm looking forward to? And actually, this is one of my little topics today, Julio, because I just recently received 3 games back to back that I've been looking forward to for a long time. And I won't be able to play them right away, but I'll play them over the next few weeks. They are Undergrove from Wingspan designer Elizabeth Hargrave. There is Kavango, which literally just arrived in the mail today. And there is also Creature Caravan from Red Raven Games. All 3 games I'm looking forward to, like a meaty Euro experience that lasts around an hour to an hour and a half. I've really, really been looking forward to all 3 of these games. And I think we're playing Undergrove first. We're playing Undergrove tomorrow. And after that, I'll have to see when I get Creature Caravan and Kavango to the table as well. Steve says he got a rare stamp last night while playing Stamp Swap and thought, nice, that's my chocolate of the day. That's true. Yeah, you can get your chocolate of the day without actually having to eat chocolate by playing Stamp Swap. The rare stamps, the gold foil stamps in Stamp Swap are chocolate themed. I did want to mention briefly my chocolate of the day because I have a little fun one today. I was at the grocery store yesterday. I was a little hungry, which is always dangerous when I go to the grocery store and I'm a little hungry. And I saw these. I've seen them before, but I haven't picked them up. They're called Just the Fun Part waffle cones, which are just like the tip of a waffle cone filled with milk chocolate. And so I picked up a few of these, or I picked up this bag. Obviously, I've already opened the bag and eaten a few of them. That was my chocolate of the day yesterday and will continue to be my chocolate of the day today. It's actually interesting. I've been eating mostly dark chocolate. I've converted almost entirely to 70+% dark chocolate just to be slightly healthier when I eat chocolate. But so I had the chance. I could have gotten the dark chocolate version of these, but I really just wanted the milk chocolate version. Sometimes I just want the milk chocolate version, and that's what I got. Anthony asks, has anyone experienced damages to their hive mats in shipping for Apiary? We have heard a few accounts of that where the corners of the hive mats have gotten damaged, which is a good reminder to us that we need to use more rounded corners. They have less chances of being dented, and the packaging should have been secure. I was a little surprised that it wasn't as secure as it should have been in the Apiary box. But if you do have that and it does impact your gameplay, please contact us on our replacement parts form, and we're happy to help you out in that way. There are a couple different ways that we can help you out with that. But Anthony, you are not alone. This is something that we have heard from multiple people, and I'm really sorry it happened to you. Zachary says, do you play any fantasy sports like fantasy football? I play exactly one fantasy sport, and that is fantasy baseball. I've been in the same league of fantasy baseball, a sport that I otherwise don't really follow all that closely. I am in St. Louis. We do have a team here. I root for that team, but it's a very mild rooting. But yeah, I played in the same league since college. So I've been in this league for probably been about 25 years at this point, the same fantasy baseball league with many of the same people. A few people have come and gone, but it's many of the same people. And I really enjoy it. I like the draft every year. And I follow it mildly throughout the year. I would say I do check it around once a day. I just kind of pop in to see how my players did. I am not in the playoffs this year. I think I finished ninth, so I'm just out of the playoffs. But that's the only fantasy sport that I do. Miles says, when we lived in Illinois, there was a farm that we supported, and they used to have a yearly members cookout on the farm. Oh, I love that. They had food, music, and a hayride, and unfortunately ended with COVID. I'm sorry to hear that, Miles. But I love that idea of, again, going to a farm and them having like a special event for the people who support that farm or buy from that farm. I love that. Chad says, do you think a game that is designed for adults and kids is marketable? I'm considering modern mechanisms for the adults and super simple mechanisms for the kids. Is it marketable? That's interesting. So I'll speak from my limited experience with this, with the game My Little Scythe. So we created My Little Scythe as a family game. So a game that people of all ages could play, but we kind of knew that it would probably be played with families of, a couple different age ranges at the table playing at the same time. However, it comes across as, and part of this is the way the art direction that we had, which was intentional. It was kind of a nod to My Little Pony. It comes across a little bit as a kids game, even though we were trying to market to kids and adults playing together, or adults even just playing the game. I think it is a fun game on its own. That it's a distilled version of Scythe, essentially. But I think I found while doing that it is difficult to market a game like that. It is tough to break away from the perception that it is a kid's game if you are trying to market it at least partially as a kid's game. The slight exception to this that I have seen is the Isle of Cats. In the Isle of Cats, there is a family mode and there is the full mode, the standard way of playing. And I don't know how it's marketed in that way, but inside the box is something that you can discover. And it probably is it is in some of the marketing materials for the game. So I think that method might be a little bit better to make the full-fledged game. And then in the box, you could include a simpler mode if you want. And certain reviewers might end up talking about that mode as well, which that might be how word gets out about that mode rather than having it be super overt through the cover design, for example, for the box as compared to My Little Scythe. That's actually a little segue into one of the other topics I wanted to briefly touch upon today, which is the topic of reviewers in the game industry. I compiled last week a lot of data from both reviewers and from publishers about how the two are interconnected right now in the industry, because I think there is a vocal minority, at least, who believe that reviewers are being paid money by publishers to say nice things about their games. And part of my reason, even though I was trying to set aside my preconceptions in compiling this data, part of the reason is that has not been my experience at all. And I wanted to see if the data backed up my experience or was in line with this vocal minority. And the results are that it is exceptionally rare that reviewers are asking for money, that or that publishers are offering to pay money to reviewers for their reviews specifically being opinion-related content, opinionated content. Now, I would still recommend checking out the blog post that I posted on Thursday and on Monday of this week that show the full questions that I asked, the full data. You might view them through a different lens, but there are a lot of questions that show some other nuances to that data, nuances about disclosure, nuances about if someone is paid to create, say, like a how to play video about a game, and they also end up expressing their opinion about the game. That happens. That is the thing that happens. And there's some questions about that sort of content as well, like the unintended opinions that can emerge when you pay for something that isn't opinionated content. So might be interesting for you to check out. I encourage you to go into it with an open mind and put your preconceptions aside and say, okay, I want to learn about what's actually happening in the game industry right now in terms of reviewers and publishers and the interconnection between the two. Yeah, I think you might learn something new by looking at that data. Or you might reinforce your existing opinions. That's fine too. Nathan says he got a play stamp shop in this weekend. It was great. His friend tried to hide a bunch of face down rare stamps behind a face up negative stamp. It led to a really fun moment when they got flipped. I'm really happy to hear that, Nathan. That is one of my favorite things about having some face down stamps that you draft and then have to cut and choose from in Stamp Swap. In terms of the farm dinner topic that I mentioned, Mary Beth says, we have a local farm in Ashland that does a farm camp for kids to get them involved in farm life. It's a great educational outreach. I love that, Mary Beth. My little niece, Anna, I think goes to a camp very similar to that every year. It's maybe a little bit more nature themed, but I think it is connected to a farm. It might even be that camp. Ashland is ringing a bell now. I wonder if Anna has attended that camp. She, I think, is on the younger side of the people who attend this camp. She's around 10 or 11 right now. Chad says, how am I healing up back to 100%? I have a pretty big scar. I'll always have a pretty good scar from my appendectomy, I think, right above my belly button. But I am feeling pretty good. My workout routine is back to normal. I am playing disc golf for the most part, back to normal at this point. What haven't I done? I haven't lifted like really, really heavy things. I have no need to do that, so I'm avoiding that. And I haven't gone back to playing soccer yet, as much as I want to play soccer right now in the really nice St. Louis weather. I might wait a little bit longer before doing that. But overall, feeling really good. I'm very fortunate. Carol's playing one of the 3 games that I mentioned, Creature Caravan, Undergrove, and Kavango that I recently received that I'm really excited to play. She says, I just started Creature Caravan solo last night. It's on the lighter side of Red Raven Games. But I really enjoyed it. I like how people can't mess with your tableau and it makes a fun puzzle. I love that. Like when I hear tableau building, which is one of my favorite mechanisms, I don't want player interaction. I don't want other players messing with my tableau. I'm okay with positive player interaction in those games, but I don't want anyone messing with it. So I'm excited to hear that about Creature Caravan. Garrett says, am I currently backing anything on crowdfunding? We have Emberleaf currently backed, and I'm eyeing March of the Ants. I would say I'm eyeing Emberleaf. It looks really cool. I love what Frank has done with it. I will probably end up backing it. I just didn't back it on the first day. And I'm also I'm also eyeing some other little projects on Kickstarter. Let's see what I'm backing or eyeing right now. I don't think I'm backing anything that's actually live right now. This one isn't live. I'm backed a project called Primates, but it's not live right now. And I am following a few projects. I'm looking at Kickstarter, but there's also GameFound Backer Kit. I don't have those up right now. Let's see. Niels says, will there be an official Apiary playmat? An official Apiary playmat? I don't think so, Niels, for a couple reasons. So the primary reason that we'd release a playmat for a game is if you are consistently picking up things off the table that are difficult to pick up when it's a table versus a playmat. Specifically cards, I think, are easier to pick up when it's on a playmat. The other thing is that rubber playmats don't show text as well as printed boards. And so in Apiary, there's some pretty important text on the board. It isn't absolutely necessary to read it once you know how to play the game, but I think it is important, helpful text. And so because it wouldn't print as well, I don't think we don't have plans to do that. The tiles pick up just fine off the board. There are no individual cards that you have to pick up off the board. So I think a playmat for Apiary would be a step back rather than a step forward in terms of what you need to play the game. Yeah. It also would not fit into the box. Valerie says, I've had a few plays, and usually we all do since you pulled the cards based on number of players. Each card has 6 or 7 items. Have you been adjusting based on the number of players? I'm trying to think of what game you're referring to, Valerie. I've had a few plays. Usually we all do since you pulled cards based on number. Are you talking about Stamp Swap? Each card has 6 or 7 items. Have you been adjusting based on number of players? Valerie, I'm not sure what that's in reference to, but let me know. I'm happy to address that question. Stanley thought, have you ever thought of designing a luxury version of all your games? For instance, a version of Wingspan, but where some of the eggs are maybe golden. Stanley, I wouldn't say that's a good question. So a couple things here. One, I try to make all of our games so they feel high value out of the box. So you don't feel like you need to then deck it out with further nicer components, that you feel like all the nice stuff is probably in the box. And if not, if it would be too expensive, then we have add-ons like we do for Wingspan, for Wormspan, for some other games. Metal coins in many of our games. That's an additional add-on. Although Charterstone does come with metal coins. However, we do sometimes do some super fancy deluxe stuff, and we actually offer golden eggs for Wingspan and Wormspan. They're not actually gold, but they look and feel gold, and they're at a price that is much better than if they actually were gold. So if you look at our web store and you search for gold, either gold or golden eggs, you will find a pack of eggs that look and feel like gold eggs that can be used for Wingspan or Wormspan. And we have something along those lines this year for our annual charity auction, where we auction off some special stuff, but we also have started doing this thing where some of that special stuff is available on our web store for anyone to buy, and a big portion of those proceeds go to the charities in the charity auction. Yeah. Tony says, was there a reason why the Forever stamps and Stamp Shop all have a basic symbol design instead of actual individual artwork? Was there ever a plan to have them be unique and size proved restrictive or something? No, no, there was never a plan to do that because they all act exactly the same way. And so we thought it might be confusing for them to all have art that look different, even though they all act the same way. Yeah, so they were always intended to have the same exact design. Valerie says, farm to table is huge here. Around Canadian Thanksgiving, there is a giant potluck at the pumpkin farm. I also know the pork farm has a pig roast in the spring. It's important to know where our food comes from and to thank farmers for their hard work. I absolutely agree, Valerie. Well said. Let me introduce the third topic of today while I continue to go through the questions. I mentioned in the title, farm dinners, reviewers, and now Outlook. Outlook is the third thing. I wanted to throw this out there. I have, for many, many years, I have used Microsoft Outlook for a couple different reasons, but I really like the interface. I like that it's pulling information from the internet, but it is not web-based. I don't use the web-based version of Outlook. I use the one on my computer. And I really like that I can easily drag and drop emails into different folders where I can find those emails later. I can tag those emails if I need to look for emails within a certain category, certain folder. Sometimes I have templates in those folders that I've used, like emails that I've sent multiple times. I might use those templates. I like that the calendar is built in. So when I'm in Outlook, if I have a reminder, it pops up on the screen and I can see that reminder. And I also like that I can have multiple emails open. I can pull them around onto different screens at multiple times. I really like Outlook. I like what it does. However, over the last few weeks, my Outlook has been breaking down. And I think it's because Microsoft is slowly phasing out the old Outlook and they've moved to a new Outlook. And I tried this new Outlook. It's also called Mail. And it just doesn't work all that well. It doesn't do any of the things that the previous Outlook does well that I really enjoyed. So for the last couple of days, I've stopped using it. We use Gmail-based email, both personally and professionally. And so I just have two different windows open, one for my personal Gmail, one for my professional Gmail. Long story short, I'm wondering if any of you have ever used and liked Outlook, and yet you've moved away to a new program that does everything that you liked that Outlook did, and you like this new program more. I've done a lot of research over the last few days about different programs that do this type of thing, like Outlook replacements, Outlook alternatives, and they all look okay, but they all look like they're addressing different concerns than the needs that I mentioned here today. So I'm curious if any of you have had a good experience after moving away from Outlook to a new program that's kind of like Outlook that you would recommend. That is one of my questions of today. Let's see. Neil says, what mechanism do you think is amazing and not copied by others? Mine is the action selection tablets from Smartphone Inc. Have I tried that game? I haven't tried that game, but now I'm curious to try that, or at least look into the action selection tablets from Smartphone. I think I've heard something good about that, Niels, but I haven't tried it myself. I don't know. I've covered so many mechanisms on my videos. I think I have almost 1,000 videos at this point about different mechanisms. And many of the mechanisms are very small and very specific and aren't copied by other games. But let me think off the top of my head. Maybe if there's one recently that, well, here's a little one that, I don't know, it's tough to find a mechanism that is truly 100% unique. for almost any mechanism. I can think of another game that's doing it in a slightly different way. But I've played the game Moon Rollers a few times recently. And in Moon Rollers, there's a mechanism where you are gaining these face-down tokens throughout the game that contribute to scoring at the end of the game. And those face-down icon tokens have numbers on them, either 1, 2, or 5. And they also have a number of icons on them. The 1s have 0 icons, the 2s have 1 icon, the 5s have 2 icons. And whenever you gain these tokens, you gain 2 of them, you look at them, and you choose 1 to put back and 1 to keep. And at the end of the game, if you have the most of that secondary icon on those tokens, you don't get to score any of the points on your icons. You still score for other things in the game, but you don't score from those tokens themselves. And they're kept face down until the end of the game, so you don't know who has the most of any given icon. I thought this was really clever. Like, I've seen other games do the thing where if you have the most or the least of something, you are not eligible to win the game at all. And so it's a little bit similar to this, but I like that this is just one of the points categories, and it adds some uncertainty to the end of the game. Players don't know exactly when they should end the game. They don't know who's in the lead. And it adds some tension whenever you make that choice. Which token do you keep the 5, knowing that it might push you over the edge and you might not score that 5 at all? Or do you keep the 1 or the 2 and score fewer points, but not be in contention for not scoring that points category at all? So I thought that was a clever thing in Moon Rollers. Also, recently, I won't go into the mechanisms, but I've really been enjoying the game Seaside, which is it's a game where you're pulling these chunky wooden bits out of a bag and choosing which side of those tokens that you want to play. And you'll either play it in your tableau or into the ocean itself. I've really been enjoying a few games of the new Star Wars deck building game, the Clone Wars version, which Megan and I have played 3 times recently, including mashing it up with the original Star Wars deck building game, which you can do. We played the Separatists versus the Empire recently, and the Separatists won from Clone Wars. They beat the Empire. We also played a game of First in Flight over the weekend and had fun with that. Another deck building game, similar to Star Wars deck building game. Very different deck building games, but both have a deck building mechanism. Julie says, I was talking about Isle of Cats in the family mode versus the normal mode. She says, the nice thing about Isle of Cats is that the family mode is also fun for adults. That's good. That's great to hear. We often play in the family mode when we want a light game to play quickly in an evening. You know, Julie, I'm glad you mentioned that. I have never actually played the family mode in Isle of Cats because I've always thought, okay, I want the full experience. But sometimes I wouldn't mind having it be a shorter game, and that is a great reason to try the shorter family mode. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Stanley says, do you think a game based on purely luck with no strategies involved is primarily for kids? If yes, what kind of strategies do you think can be incorporated to expand the player audience? I would say yes, Stanley. And granted, I don't know much about kids' games. I don't have kids. I don't see my nieces and nephews nearly as often as I want to. And when I do see them, I'm often trying to introduce them to games that involve decisions rather than luck. But the few times that I have played with really, really young kids and playing games, they seem to genuinely enjoy games that involve a lot of luck, like roll and move games, games where you really aren't making many decisions, but it's still engaging for them. And I think a classic example of this is Candyland. In Candyland, I think there are almost no decisions that you actually make in Candyland. But you actually can, per your question, you actually can add a little bit of decisions to those games as kids get a little bit older. I'm not sure if this is officially in the Candyland rules or just a variant that I've heard. But in Candyland, typically, I think you were drawing a card and moving to the next color on the track that's shown on that card. So if the color is purple, you're moving to the next purple space on the track. You can add decisions to this by, instead of drawing 1 card, you draw 2 cards and let the child choose between those 2 cards. Which space do they want to move to? I don't know if Candyland is the best for that because oftentimes there is a clearly better decision there, but at least it is a decision that you're adding to the game. And even if you want to layer it a little bit more, you can have them draw those cards at the end of their turn, so at the beginning of their turn, so they can start to plan ahead. Which space do I want to move to when it becomes my turn? Here's Frank himself showing up to talk about the Isle of Cats. Frank does have Emberleaf on Kickstarter right now if you want to check out his new card dancing mechanism. Niels was asking about completely new mechanisms. I think card dancing is completely new, Niels, so you might want to check out Emberleaf on Kickstarter. Frank says, in the most recent version of the Isle of Cats, I now show the playtime and age rating for both the family and the standard modes on the sides of the box, and that has proven very helpful for people who are browsing through games, through game shops in particular. That's awesome, Frank. I think that's a really clever way to show that both modes are really important to the game itself. Let's see, just scrolling through. I see some other comments about farms. Ian says, have I played A Gentle Rain? No, I haven't played A Gentle Rain, but I am curious about it. I've seen a lot of people saying it's a very chill solo experience. Eric says, have you been surprised about some of the biggest games this year? I'm always surprised by which games take off, which games I really enjoy. I think there's those two aspects. A game that's big for me might be a game that's different, that's big for the community or big for the industry. Let's see if I have a big surprise for me so far this year. A game that caught me off guard. Let's see, I don't want to completely spoil my list for the year, but I would say, in both ways, I would say that Harmonies is one of the biggest surprises of the year for me so far. I did not know that Harmonies was coming. I think it has really taken off with a bunch of different people, many different people. It's been very popular, and is one that I really genuinely enjoy. So I would say Harmonies is maybe a cross section for me as to games that have been surprisingly big for me and surprisingly big for the board gaming community / industry this year. I had some segue based on that topic as well. Oh, yeah. One of the other questions I had for today was, in addition to my Outlook question, which maybe I'll get some answers about that in a minute as soon as I catch up with the comments. But games that end well. I have an older video about how different games end, like how the game ends. But I've been thinking about recently about games that end well. Like when the game ends, that it feels like the right time. It feels really good to end the game at that time. For whatever reason, maybe it's a climactic end. Maybe it's just a satisfying end. Like you got to do what you wanted to do in the game. But I hear all too often about games that kind of end with a whimper, or they end abruptly or too soon. And I want to look at the opposite. I want to look at the positive side of games that end really, really well. Competitive games, cooperative games. What are games where, like, think of the last few games that you played, for example, and think about how that game ended, if it felt right to you when you actually ended that game. I'd like to know about those examples if you have any in the comments here. It's going to be a tough category, I think, to think about. I'll have to look through it from a few different lenses. But yeah, let me know your thoughts about that. Games that end well. George says, what do you think about Andromeda's Edge? Will you play it in the future? I am certainly hoping to play it once. It is not one that I backed. It was a very expensive game, but I'm excited to give it a try. I did play Dwellings of Eldervale a few times, and I did really enjoy it. And another one that I have never owned, but that I enjoyed my plays of it. So I am hoping to play Andromeda's Edge. Ashy Feet says, they got their Apiary expansion. Love the new hives. The new -1 worker explore token was interesting. Is that something that should be activated immediately, or can it be saved for later in the game? That's a good question about the explore tokens. Do you use them right away or later? I believe you use them right away. Yeah, I believe all the explore tokens are to be used right away. Correct me if I'm wrong about that, if anyone has the rules in front of them, but I'm 99% sure that's right. Let's see. Anthony says, what are your thoughts on Puerto Rico's special edition release? Honestly, I haven't looked all that much into it. I've seen some ads for it and some photos, but I haven't dug too deep into it. So I don't really have any thoughts on it, Anthony. Do you? Feel free to share your thoughts if you have any. The only thing I remember is that I think some AI generated art was used for the original box, and they admitted to it and stopped using it, which I appreciate. I don't use or condone the use of AI generated art. Okay, Corell said, both Corell and Garrett mentioned Thunderbird. So that's great. I'll make a note of Thunderbird here to check that out. That is one that came up in my research a few times and didn't immediately look like it was the right fit, but I trust your judgment, Corell, and Garrett. I trust your judgment as well. Damon just says, it might be my PC. It very much might be my PC. I have Outlook files that have been on there for many, many years. And so I don't even open all the files of my old emails anymore when I open Outlook, but it seems to be failing. And I have read that they are migrating to the new Outlook. And so I think at some point they're going to stop supporting the old Outlook, and I think more issues might arise over time. So I'm hoping to make a meaningful move now. And keep in mind too, that I'm not just looking for the email part of it. I'm looking for the calendar part of it. I did for now. I exported my calendar to. I'm looking at my other screen here where I have it. I exported my calendar to Gmail, so I have it on there, and that's working okay. But if I don't have that tab open, it doesn't. Notifications don't pop up, even though I think I've activated desktop notifications. They're still not popping up, and I really rely very heavily on those notifications in Outlook to remind me to do certain things. So maybe I just need to restart or something like that, but I haven't figured out how to get that to work yet. George says he's kind of experiencing something similar. So yeah, George, I think we're in the same boat. Outlook for 20 years, same thing here. Yeah, let me know if you find something that works well. A few of you have said that you've enjoyed Smartphone Inc. Board Game Bite is saying the same thing. I need to put that Smartphone Inc. I need to check that out a little bit more in detail. Aaron says that we moved from Outlook to Gmail, and really, I for clarification, I have used Gmail the whole time, but I've just pulled the Gmail into Outlook and like written emails there and sent emails there, organized emails there, and then it pushes it back to Gmail. So that is nice for me because it means that on my phone I can check Gmail, I can check my email on my phone, which I think I can still do in Outlook, but I like the Gmail app. But I use Outlook as like the hub for it. Greg says he's used Outlook at work and at home, but he also misses the function. Yeah, it looks like a lot of people resonate with this, where they like Outlook. Hilda says, am I looking for suggestions more as project status and management communication system? I'm looking for mostly email management and partially calendar. I like that they're all together in one system, so I can have it all in one place. I think, Hilda, one of the things I'm finding in the research of these other platforms is that they are trying to like redefine what email is. And I don't need that. Like, I already like what email is. I just wanted to keep, I want to keep doing it. We keep doing email the way it is. That's me personally. I understand that might be different from other people. Eric has a fair point here, Eric. If Outlook is being weird, you might want to try deleting the Outlook data file on your computer. The next time you open Outlook, it should re-download your mail data and create a new data file. That makes me nervous, but I guess I could delete it. I think right now what I've done is I've kind of disconnected some of the data files. I agree. It probably is overwhelmed with the data files. It's hard for me to tell which ones I need to disconnect at this point because there's so much history there. But that is a potential solution. I agree. Steve mentioned, so in terms of games that end well, I think Steve is touching upon an important element here, how you actually score the games. Like there are some games where you end and that's the end of the game, period. There are other games, a lot of Euro games where the scoring happens at the end of the game and how that can be done well in a way that the game still ends well during the scoring period. I like that, Steve. Tony says, I really appreciated that the Apiary expansion adds to the game without changing or introducing new rules. I love more expansions for that exact reason, Tony, especially since not only is it easy to get to the table for the first time, but it's also easy just to leave everything shuffled together if you're introducing the game to new players in the future, if those new elements don't add complexity. Carell does clarify that the old Outlook is not going anywhere anytime soon. Microsoft is really trying to move away from it, but the new Outlook just doesn't do it. I agree. Yeah, I was surprised at how poorly it was working. I had hope. I gave it a try for like 2 days, and then I realized it just wasn't downloading my mail. I had to do weird things for it to actually bring in my mail. Stefan says, what are my thoughts on real-time games like Project Elite? Any thought on the design of such games? I do have some videos about real-time / simultaneous games, Stefan, because we released a game a few years ago called Pendulum that uses a real-time timer mechanism with worker placement. And my experience with it is that I love that element of Pendulum. I think it is a really, really cool element in the game. However, I think it is tough to market. I think it's tough to market real time. I think a lot of gamers like to have the time to think about their turns, and adding that timed element I found it very difficult to market. So it isn't something that I think I'll be pursuing in future game designs. But there are games with real-time elements or timed elements that I do really enjoy. And I have some older videos about that around the time that Pendulum came out. Brian says that the Star Wars: Attack of the Clones game has become his most played game of 2024. Yeah, we played it 3 times. I look forward to playing it more. I love that with the Clone Wars and the original, you can now have some great it expands the number of matchups that you have. Even if you and even in the original, just doing the same matchup back and forth was always really satisfying in my opinion. Another +1 for Thunderbird here. Yeah, I'll have to check out Thunderbird. William says he's a sysadmin. Do you use Outlook, the new or the old version? I have both on my computer right now. I have the old version, which I've used for a long, long time, and then I tried the new version, and that really wasn't working for me. Just like it literally wasn't working for me, rather than just having some hiccups like the old one was. William says he recommends the new one over Microsoft Mail if you want to stick with Outlook for a while, but Microsoft Mail allows integration with Gmail. You know, maybe I'm using Mail instead of Outlook. Although no. So William, the reason I might be conflating the two is that Outlook gave me the option to switch to the new version of Outlook. Like it's like a toggle in the upper right. And when I did that, it opened up what it called Mail. And so I assumed it was the same, the new Outlook and what they're calling Mail, but maybe I'm mistaking the two and they aren't actually the same. It sounds like that's what you're saying. Maybe I can get your thoughts on that at Design Day. Miles also echoes the family version, the value of the family version of Isle of Cats. Ray says he's harvested a bunch of grapes from his grapevine with the plan of making wine for the first time. That's exciting, Ray. That you're actually making some homemade wine. And yeah, that's easy. You were thinking about viticulture while you were doing that. Let me know how it goes if you make a special viticulture themed bottle of wine from your grapes. Jerry says also a longtime user of Outlook, and he shifted to Gmail, and he found that he's not missing anything. Jerry, the main thing I find that I'm missing, so I'm seeing in Outlook, I keep looking at my other screen because this is where I have it up. It doesn't have like the folders that I'm used to, but I think I can simulate them with labels. I think I can get around that with like the label system in Gmail. That's fine. The calendar is what's throwing me so far, where I do have the calendar open on another tab, but the reminders aren't popping up the way that I want them to. So it's less about the mail there than the calendar app on Gmail itself. There's probably a way around that I just haven't figured out, and I probably just need to restart, and it will implement the desktop notifications. What was the other part? Oh, and also that it's all web based. I enjoyed the aspects that I described of having it not be web based, but so far it's gone over okay to switch just to the web based versions of Gmail instead of Outlook. Let's see, just going through a few comments here. I see some great comments. I'm just scrolling through looking for questions because I'm a little bit behind on comments. Eric says that he would put, where we go. Oh, Austin says his wife and I have noticed that it typically takes us longer to finish a game when there's a game-ending condition as opposed to a set number of rounds. Yeah, I want to talk about that in the video, about the value of a set number of rounds versus a player-driven end of game. And Steve says his last game of Scythe ended well for his friend. He did an action and he got up to 18 popularity off his enlist action that he uncovered earlier, giving him his 6th star. Scythe is one where I've played around with the end game condition a lot. I think by and large, people maybe don't love how the game ends in Scythe, that it can be a little abrupt. Even though you can definitely see it coming, like if you're looking at the other players, definitely a reason to pay attention to other players. But in the win gambit, I added a lot of other options through the resolution tiles of how the game can end. So if you want to try other ways to end the game in Scythe, the resolution tiles are a way to do that. Eric says dice throne typically ends well in the sense that the last turn is typically still anyone's game. I do like that in a dueling game where it's very close. And I agree that dice throne is a good example of that in a dueling game in particular. Chad says he likes the end of Scythe as well. I'm glad to hear that. I like that some people like the way that the game ends in Scythe. Zachary says, are there any games that you would like to see the Castles in Burgundy or Puerto Rico treatment, like the super deluxe treatment? There was a comment, I think Stanley mentioned this earlier, a game you love so much that you would love a top tier production. I don't know. I think I've talked about this recently a little bit with like the deluxification of games when Making a game super nice can sometimes actually make it harder to get to the table. I don't know exactly why, especially when the box is bigger, when the setup is more elaborate. But sometimes the two go hand in hand. You can have a fancier version of a game where setup is very much a part of the design process of the game. But yeah, I guess the question is there a game I love so much that I would want a super, super deluxe version of it? I guess I don't know if the two go hand in hand for me. The games I love them because of the way they are, and I don't necessarily know that if I need a super deluxe version of it. So I don't have an answer off the top of my head for that. But do you? Feel free to let me know, Zachary, or anyone else, if you have a game in mind for something like that. Ray says that he sometimes has a tricky time with game endings as well. I sometimes feel good about an ending, but I can tell that the other players feel frustrated, like it ended too soon for them, didn't get to finish something. And that's the tough part. I like the games where you feel like you wish you had one more turn, but you didn't have that turn, or where you were able to build something that was important to you, even if you weren't able to do everything that you wanted to in the game. Ray says this is especially the case if I get the strategy of a new game and end up way ahead of the other players. I usually only feel like the whole table is communally pleased with how things end in co-op games. That's interesting. Well, that's the most common experience where everyone's happy with how the game ends. Valerie says she likes the end of terraforming Mars. From a theme point of view, it makes sense to end the game when the oxygen is at level. It's no longer minus 30 on Mars, and that 9% of the planet is covered by oceans. You have really thematic end of the game in terraforming Mars. I also like and find positive when ends are predictable after a set rounds, like in Wormspan. You know what's coming, and you can plan ahead accordingly. I'll add terraforming Mars and Wormspan to that list for different reasons. Good reasons there, Valerie. I like those. Sam says that Tir Naog has a great ending where you're discarding a card at the end of each round, which makes the decision space feel tighter and tighter. So the game gets tighter as you play. I like that as well. Zachary mentions Rogers of the Ganges having a great finish. I think any games with a race to the end lend themselves to having great finishes. Oh yeah, games where there's a racing element to them, like Rogers. Yeah, that resonates with me. I haven't played John Company, but George mentions it here. There's an event system, part of a round sequence, which at times you have bad luck at rolling the event dice may trigger an unexpected game end for everyone at the table. That seems to be something that designer really likes to do, have like unexpected, sudden, luck-driven end game conditions. Yeah. Sam says Project L also feels nice that every player gets one last chance to fill tiles in front of them, which can be really satisfying when you get to make use of all your shapes one last time. What was it? I was playing a game. Oh, yeah. Okay. I was thinking about this with First in Flight recently. In First in Flight, and I'm glad you mentioned this as well. Project L does this. I'll add this. But Project L and First in Flight, you get one last chance to do a flight at the end of the game. So after the end game is triggered, everyone gets to fly one last time, which is great. I really like that everyone has that chance to do that in First in Flight. Sean says, a project manager I used to work with used Basecamp. It was a good experience. You might check it out. Yeah, I actually do use Basecamp, not for email, but I do use Basecamp for project management and really do enjoy it. Mark says he has some bias here, but he likes the end of Rolling Realms. 9 turns is definitely the sweet spot for one round. It feels super great when you score all the stars in 9 turns. I do like I like the end in Rolling Realms too, Mark, so I appreciate you mentioning that. Eric says, I think of games where the last round consists of the most powerful actions. I also personally like hidden objective swings during scoring. That's interesting. So like Lords of Waterdeep has that. And the again, that comes to mind for like big swings, Tapestry and Russian Railroads both have big kind of climactic scoring in the final round. Things that you do score a lot based on in the final round. So I'll mention Tapestry and Russian Railroads. Paul says, good point about scoring at the end. I loved Bunny Kingdom right up until the end. Scoring was crazy cumbersome and took forever. Won't play again on the table. Yeah, that can the how you score and how much you wait to score until the end of the game, especially if there's some calculations involved. And this is coming from someone who teaches math. That means that it really is quite cumbersome, and that can detract from the end of the game. So Valerie says, I know nothing about Outlook, but the one we used at work is part of Microsoft 360 and has been the same as the Outlook app. Is it the Outlook app that has changed? I don't know exactly. The classic Outlook has not changed. It just is not working as well for me as it used to. And so if you switch to the new Outlook or the new Mail, whichever one it is, if it does not both, operates differently. Yeah. Tyler says he likes Wingspan and Libertalia's end of game. It's clear when it's coming. I've seen. I like that, Tyler. That idea that seeing the end game coming is pretty important. Players can plan for it. Nobody is left shocked or feeling that they couldn't finish what they wanted. So, yeah, Libertalia, you see it coming. I like that. Luke says, in Dwarf Romantic, it finishes in a good time, even if you can't get the scoring hexes you need. I agree. Yeah, Dwarf Romantic does have, and Dwarf Romantic is definitely like a one more turn game. You're trying to eke out one more turn. And then it's still impressive when you have that type of game and it still ends well. Board Game Bite says, have you ever played a game so much that you burned yourself out on it? Far Away is our current burnout game. Fantastic game, but it feels like we played it too much. It is pretty rare that I encounter a game that I'm playing so much that I burn out on it. I'm sure it has happened, but it is, at least recently, is very rare for me to do that. I usually stop before I burn out on it, I would say. Mary Beth says that she really enjoys co-ops that are super tight the entire game and need a lot of strategic cooperation to pull out the win in the last few turns. It's so tense and exciting. Yeah, can you think of any, what's your favorite co-op that does that, Mary Beth? I do like co-ops that have that feeling. Especially when, like, as you said, the whole game has meaning, but those last few turns just feel really, really tense based on the decisions that you've made up to that point. Hilda recommends a Liquid Planner for project status management. Thank you for recommending that, Hilda. I use a few things for project management, but that's good that you're enjoying Liquid Planner. Mark has a question about game design. I'm aware the outline I made feels functional, but I'm having the fear that when I make cards for prototype that it will be hugely imbalanced. How do you get over this? The main way I get over it, Mark, is by trying it. Like it is okay for the cards to be imbalanced the first time you play, and the second time you play, and the third time you play. I think you just have to make some version of the cards your best guess and get it to the table and be willing to change them on the fly. If something feels really imbalanced or literally is imbalanced while you're playing, just say, okay, that's worth 5 points instead of 10 points. That doesn't make sense. Or this only gives you one resource instead of 2 resources. Or you can only use this once per round instead of anytime you want. Yeah, I think you just got to try it. Yeah. That's how I get over it. Brianna says she likes a set win condition as it helps me corral my analysis paralysis and it gives me a way to guide my actions sometimes. I always feel like the number of rounds is one less than I want it to be. So set win condition where everyone is moving towards that singular win condition in games. Brianna, what's a favorite example of yours where that does that? Euphoria has one, for example. I think for some, it might be a little abrupt that Euphoria ends when someone places their 10th star and nothing else happens after that, and that person wins. So I'm curious to see if you have maybe a better example than Euphoria of that. Julie likes the end of Arc Nova. Having the scoring tokens pass each other, like in Rogers of the Ganges as well, is an easy visual for when the end is coming. So you can see it coming, but you can achieve it with different balances of appeal and conservation points. I like it too. And actually in Arc Nova, there's there's a little bit of calculation afterward, but it isn't much. I wouldn't say it's cumbersome afterwards. So there's still a little bit of drama that happens at the end of a game of Arc Nova. Let's see, we have a few more minutes here. Let's see if there's a few other topics that I wanted to bring up today. I'm reading a book called The Life Impossible. I'm really enjoying the book right now. And we just started watching a show called Chaos on Netflix. That's really interesting so far. I would say that the jury is still out in my mind as to whether or not I love the show, but I love the ambition of it. And it's interesting so far. It's about, the premise is that Greek gods actually exist. And people kind of know they exist, but they don't know that sometimes they walk on Earth. And it shows a version of the modern day where that is the worldwide religion, where Greek gods definitely exist and religions are based around those Greek gods. Yeah, it's an interesting premise, in my opinion. I don't know if I had any other big questions of the day today. Those were the main ones. My video this past weekend was about polyomino games, like games with Tetris-style pieces. And I had another question of the day, but I'll save that because you all have given me some great answers to the questions about Outlook and about how games end. So I'll just focus on looking at those answers for the rest of the game. Aaron says, one of the reasons I love Foundations of Rome is that they really thought about the setup, and in some cases, it's a faster setup than some smaller box games. Yeah, it is nice to have a game that there's games that do come in the bigger boxes, bigger components, and yet setup is a huge part of the thought process of the product design. Jerry confirms, talking about how I used to use folders in Outlook and really appreciated that. He says he used the label system to simulate folders in Gmail. Google Calendar by default integrates quite well with the email side of things. I keep the calendar sidebar open alongside the inbox list. I do too, but I'm only getting pop-ups if I go over to that tab. Yeah. So that's the odd little thing I've experienced so far over here on my work email side of monitor over here. Chad says that Clank always ends great. Everyone knows when the end is coming because of the race to get out. I never win, but it's a blast or scramble to get out. I agree. Clank does have, in my opinion, a really satisfying ending. Stefan says, I like games like Race for the Galaxy where you have two competing end game goals. There's a very good video from the designer explaining how it adds to the game. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I think there's a good balance when you have multiple end game conditions. I think that there's such a thing as having too many. I often think that 3 is too many. Anything above 3, I think, is definitely too many things to remember. But having 1 or 2, I think, is nice and can add a nice twist to the game. Ian says he likes the ending of Marvel Champions. It's truly a knockout situation in Marvel Champions. Kevin says, I think a game end condition for a competitive game can be a bit more divisive when there's disparity between the experience of the players. That's true. I think it is a little bit easier in a cooperative game than a competitive game. G-Money says, I love Four Shuffle and the way it ends, even though you don't know when the third winter card is coming up. You start planning for the end after the second shows up. I agree. I'll have to think about that one if I want to put that one on the list. But I do appreciate at least the ending of Four Shuffle and the tension that it adds once you have that first winter or the second winter. You know winter is coming at that point. Jerry says that Camel Up has always provided memorable endings with often a sudden shift in camel stacks, allowing a bottom camel to come out ahead and cross the finish line in the nick of time. I agree. Camel Up is one of those racing games I'll add to the racing games list with a really climactic ending in a competitive game. Neil's mentioned Subterra and Nemesis as having great endings for him, but you have to dive into the theme. So they have thematic endings in both of them. It's been a while since I played Subterra, but I have played Nemesis more recently, and I definitely agree about that. Let's see. Joker ES likes the end of Concordia. You have a rough idea of how each player is doing, but often the scores are high enough that you can't tell who is in first, second, or third. That's interesting. I'll have to think about the end of Concordia. You can see it coming, that is for sure. And there's a climactic element to endgame scoring. I would say it might be verges a little bit on the side of like cumbersome math at the end of the game. But I'll have to think about that. That's a good option to consider. I'll make a note of it. Concordia. I will have to think about how much scoring plays into how a game ends, how you're able to walk away from the game. And actually, part of the context for this is I was thinking about how I think it's important for things to end well, for a meal to end well, for a movie, a book, a TV show. When they end well, I think that can really make a lasting impression on the entire book, the entire meal, the entire movie. If it ends poorly, it can really detract from the entire experience, even if the rest of the experience was great. So I mentioned Game of Thrones earlier. I actually didn't mind the end of Game of Thrones all that much. I don't love the way it ended, but how people scored the final season went way down compared to the previous seasons. And I think has impacted how people view the show. Same with Lost. Again, I don't completely mind how Lost ended, but the way that Lost ended impacts how people view that entire show. So I think that endings are really, really important, in my opinion. Stefan mentions Fantasy Realms is one where an app helps so much with scoring that it can make the ending much more smooth. I haven't ever tried the app for Fantasy Realms, but I have heard that as well. Fairly Odd Parent likes the end of Cubitos because there's a literal race and you can tell if you're close to the end or not. That's true. Cubitos, another racing game that I haven't played in a long time, but I do like the end of that game. Brianna mentions Unsettled and Anne's End for that end of game climactic feel for any game. And Anne's End has the word end in it, so that probably belongs in the video somewhere. Greg says, I like the ending of games where it's based on meeting criteria, like in Red Rising, Expeditions, and Scythe. Expeditions and Scythe, in fact, and this is a good example. I actually think, Greg, they're my own games, but Expeditions and Scythe in particular, there is a clear visual to remembering it. Like, it's not like you have to keep in your head all the different scoring categories. They're right there on the table, and you know when it happens because you don't have any stars anymore. If you've placed your 6th star, you don't have any other additional stars to place. Red Rising is a little bit trickier because you have to keep an eye on who has 7 of different things. 7, you're looking for multiple categories to have 7 in that category. So there isn't as clear of a visual as there is inside in Expeditions with those stars. Let's see. I know I'm a few behind on comments a little bit, so I'm going to look for questions real quick. Let's see. Chad says, have I ever watched the Geek Nights YouTube? Talk a lot about heuristics in gaming. They bring out that truly balance makes for a boring game. There needs to be some imbalance for excitement. I actually have a video coming out very soon that is called Balance is Boring. I don't quite know when I'm releasing that, but that'll happen really soon. I don't know if I have watched Geek Nights. Nights spelled like nighttime. I will check that out. Thank you for that recommendation. Mary Beth mentions Spirit Island as her favorite of those tight co-ops. It just needs so much cooperation in the last few turns to pull off the win. Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. And I agree that Spirit Island often comes down to a few things and things that you have had an impact on throughout the game. Brianna likes the ending of Century Spice Road. I like that one too. Yeah, I really like the ending of Century. That's a good one. And let's see if there's any other questions here. Paul likes the ending of Coffee Roaster. You spend most of the game roasting coffee, and then you get to pour the cup, which is press your luck. The whole game builds toward. That's pretty cool. I like the idea that you might be doing something a little bit different at the very end of the game. And I'm thinking, as you mentioned, I haven't played Coffee Roaster, but Rumble Nation, which I talked about a few times, is one of my favorite combat games. Rumble Nation has a cinematic end of the game where you just like watch it play out based on the decisions that you've made during the game. Brianna also mentions the Apiary hibernation system. I actually do really like the hibernation system, that the game is giving you a strong incentive to move towards the end of the game, and you can see it coming. It's a very visual element of being able to see it coming. So I agree with you there about Apiary's hibernation system. Let's see. Joshua says that this is interesting, that sometimes when he doesn't like certain seasons of Survivor, even if the rest of the season was great, because of who won that season, if they don't feel like someone that Joshua thought maybe should have won. Yeah. Zachary says, quote, it's all about how you leave them. I agree. All right. I'm a little bit behind here. Let's see if there's any other questions before I head on out. Miles loves the end of Chips. Is that Bag of Chips, Miles? Or like, I don't know if there's a different game called Chips. I'll assume you mean Bag of Chips there, but let me know if you mean something differently. Bag of Chips. That is a fun end. In fact, it is a really, really fun end, that final reveal in Bag of Chips. Yeah, it does clarify Bag of Chips. Awesome. Thank you all for joining me today for these questions. One technical, one just fun about the ending of games. I hope this video ends well for you and that you have a great Wednesday and a great week. And for everyone who comes to Design Day this weekend, I look forward to seeing you and I hope you have a great time there. Take care. See ya. Bye.